All right, 1-3. First thing we're going to look at is 4 ways to collect data. Actually, yeah, 4 ways to collect data. So data collection techniques. It all depends on what you're studying, what technique you're going to use. If you take yourself back to your biology paper that you guys had to write. Yeah. Got an F on that? Oh. What kinds of things did you do to collect your data? No, if you didn't turn one in. Yeah. You could fail that still, but if you didn't turn one in, then you failed the class. Tell me some things you did to collect your data. What did you guys do?
We researched.
No, how'd you collect your data?
We took people.
Survey.
You did a survey. Anybody do any experiments?
I did.
You did an experiment.
No, I didn't even do it, but
Oh.
I got 98 on paper.
Oh, on paper, okay. So, some things you can do, you can perform an experiment.
I hate golf, but I actually did it.
Perform an experiment. A lot of times you see this with the drug companies and drug testing. If they want to test their new drug, they get some people to come in. We're going to give you this drug. We get some other people to come in. You're not getting the drug, and you do to see if there's any improvement in things. So perform an experiment. So usually part of a population is given some kind of treatment so I could use that as a, say I want to try a new teaching technique. I could do something different with this hour than I do with 5th hour. See if there's a more improvement in here than over there. So, lots of ways you can perform an experiment. Sometimes experiments are either going to be too expensive or too dangerous. Say they want to teach a pilot what to do if something happens to the engines in the plane. Are we going to send the pilot up there and knock the engines out?
Yes.
Probably not going to pull that one off. So what do they do? What do they do to, you know this, what do they do with pilots to train them? Simulators. They put them in a simulator and they simulate everything. If you watch that movie, what's that one, that Apollo 11, 13, where they went out? With Tom Hanks in it?
Yeah.
You haven't seen it? Yeah, the guy practiced in the simulator how to get them back. I mean, it was just, he kept doing it and doing it and doing it because they only had so much power and all that. Yeah, they put him in a simulator to simulate the conditions up there to get that airplane back. So, if you can use a simulation to gather your data. And you do the simulation when the real experiment might be too dangerous or too expensive. Okay, you talked about surveying, doing some surveys to gather your data. So you're doing an opinion poll. You're going to do a survey. So what you can do here, if you want to get your data, is take a census. What's a census? A count of what? How many people? A census is everyone in your population you are studying. So a census is a count of everyone in your population. This is usually not practical because your populations are usually way, way, way too large to do a census. But the United States tries to do a census. You know how often they do the census? Every 10 years. If the year ends in a 0, they do a census. There's a long form and a short form, and they try to get to every single household or person, homeless or not, in the United States to get them to fill out this information. So that's a huge task. It costs tons of money, but they try to do it every 10 years to see where we're at with people and their living conditions and all kinds of stuff. Census. So if you can't do a census, which most people can't because your population's usually too big, what do you think we do? Use sampling. Still want to be able to do your survey. So if you did a survey, you probably did a sample of students in the high school. Okay, sampling is just a count or measure of part of the population being studied.
You said the word measure.
I know.
Write it down.
A count of part of the population being studied. And this is where problems come in. What you have to be careful of is not getting what's called a biased sample. So you want good sampling techniques so that you don't end up with a biased sample. A biased sample? What's a biased sample? What do you think I mean by biased? It's one-sided. It favors something. Because you didn't get a good, I don't know what the word is, like a big population, you didn't really get it evenly distributed. You got like a big chunk of something.
Like a jury.
Like a jury, yes. Yeah, exactly. So what can happen here, you have to be careful of a biased sample that will give you bad results. A biased sample will lead to poor results. And we're going to talk about sampling techniques now. So there's 4 ways to collect data. So 2 are kind of experimentally based. You actually have the experiment or you've got the simulation. And then 2 are like census or survey based, a census and sampling. But there's 5 sampling techniques. Some are better than others. So we're going to go through the 5 sampling techniques. And then that's it. Can I get rid of this? Well, I guess I should have done the one example here. Let me do the one example. We'll talk about it. Example 1.
You only have one example?
Well, we're not even going to write it down. We're just going to talk about it.
Oh.
Which sampling techniques should you use here? Right here. Okay. If you were going to study the effect of exercise on senior citizens, which of those 4 experiment would be a good choice? Let some exercise, let some not, see what the results are. What if you were going to study the effect of radiation fallout on senior citizens? Yeah, Austin, you probably would. Simulation would be best there. Obviously too dangerous to throw the experiment at them. So you would do a simulation here. Okay, now the sampling techniques. I'll leave that open.
Oh man, I thought we were going to do homework now.
Oh no, we got to talk about our 5 sampling techniques. We want to avoid a biased sample. You're going to tell me which ones will create a biased sample, which ones won't. Well, probably won't. So, sampling techniques. This is a little subset of sampling. Sampling techniques. First one is called random sampling or simple random sampling. So sometimes you see the word simple, sometimes you don't. Random sampling is, there's a couple, well, the main way you do this is you can assign everyone in your population a number. So assign everyone in the population a number. Then you're going to use a random number generator and generate a list of, say, 30 random numbers, and those would be the 30 people you use in your sample. So assign everyone a number, then use a random number generator random number generator to generate a list of numbers to use. A random number generator, calculators have random number generators, computers have random number generators. I mean, if all else fails, you could put slips of paper, 1 through however many, 200, in a bowl, and you randomly pick out 20 of them to use. Those are all random number generators. So that's random sampling. Number 2 is a stratified sample. Okay, what you do here is you take your population and you divide it into 2 or more subgroups. So divide the population into 2 or more subgroups. Then after that, you randomly select from each subgroup. So, let's talk about the high school as our population. I have to divide the high school into 2 or more kind of naturally occurring subgroups. How could I divide the high school up?
Grade.
By grade. So one way I could do it, I could have the 4 groups. 9th graders, 10th, yep, 11th, and 12th graders. And let's say I take 10 from each one. 10, randomly select 10 from each class, and that will be my sample of 40. How else could I divide the high school? Upperclassmen and lowerclassmen, so 9th and 10th. 11th and 12th. And take however many I want, say 15 from each. And have a sample of 30. How else could I divide the high school? Males and females, boys and girls. As long as you've got at least 2 groups, and you take from each group, take 25 boys, 25 girls for a sample of 50. So that's stratified. You take from every single subgroup has been represented. And how you pick your subgroups, that's up to you. Okay, stratified gets confused with cluster sample. Are you ready for cluster sample? Number 3. Cluster so you have your population divided into subgroups. It's usually more than 2 subgroups. into several. And then you use everyone in a couple of randomly selected subgroups. So you usually need smaller divisions, lots of them. So let's say if I wanted to use the high school, right now I could say I'm going to use every classroom in third hour right now that's in session. And I'm going to number them. So maybe there's, 20 classes going on right now? I'm going to randomly pick 4 of those classrooms and use everybody in those 4 classrooms. So that's an example of cluster. I've got my subgroups, but I may not be grabbing from every single classroom. So let's use that as our example. So let's use the 20 classrooms as my subgroups. Then I'm going to randomly select 3. You would number them, 1 through 20, and I'd use my random number generator to give me 3 random numbers between 1 and 20. Yeah, that's not random. Your brain cannot be random. You could put 20 slips of paper in and pick 1, 2, and 3. That's random. So you have to have divisions. You give them all a number, and then you do that random thing. So randomly select 3, and then use everyone in those 3. If I wanted to use the classrooms and use the stratified sample, what would have to happen with my 20 classrooms? What could I do? If I wanted to make it a stratified sample, if I had 20 classrooms, so 20 groups, what would I have to do? 5 from each or 2 from each one. Every single classroom would have to be represented for it to be a stratified. See the difference? Don't see the difference? If I have 20 classrooms, classroom, 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 20 of these squares, right? I'm going to now everybody in there gets numbered. I'm going to randomly select 2 people from every single classroom.
Wait, can you show me
Yep. Down here, I've got my 20 classrooms all the way down to number 20, and I'm going to randomly select 3 of these classrooms only. Mrs. Miller's room got picked, the art room got picked, and the gym got picked. I'm going to use everybody in those 3. So there's a lot of classrooms that didn't get touched. But up here, I'm going to go to every single classroom and pick 2 people. See the difference? Okay, stratified and cluster, those people get those 2 confused. So if every single subgroup has a little bit taken from it, it's stratified. If everybody in a group is used but not all the groups are used, that's cluster. And then, and I think you've seen this before, we've got what's called a systematic sample. Systematic. Okay, everyone in the population is assigned a number, if you can, if possible.
Wait, so this is like number 4?
Yep, number 4. If possible. Because I'll talk about one that you've seen where it's not really possible. Everyone in your population is assigned a number. After that, you randomly pick a starting point. So let's say I'm going to use the high school again. Let's just say we have 500 kids. So they've got alphabetized lists. I'll start with the freshmen and go through the seniors. 1 through 500, everybody's got a number. Then I'm going to use my random number generator to say, give me a starting point. Let's say number 102 comes up. So 102 is going to be the first person I use. And now I'm going to use, say, every 10th person after that. It's very systematic because it's an exact amount in between. So randomly pick a starting point. Then use every nth. You decide what that is. Person after that. I think you had an example where they were checking the speed of the cars on a highway, and they said they were going to use every 5th car. There's no way to number how many cars are coming, so they're just going to go out there and say, oh, I'm going to start at 9 o'clock, and I'm going to use a little radar gun, and I'm going to pick every 5th car that goes by and get their speed. So that's a systematic way to gather that data. So that one's kind of easy to pick up on in the examples because of this every 5th one, every 10th one, every 1,000th one, depends on how big your population is. And then our last one is very, very bad, and I'm sure it's what most of you used.
How long is it?
It's no longer than that. It's called a convenience sample.
Why is it bad?
Convenience sample
Thank you, Axel.
is just using anybody ready and willing and able to take your survey. This is where bias comes in heavily, because what are you more likely to do if you're doing a survey? Go to your lunch table, give it to all your friends. Why do you hang out with your friends? Because they think like you, they're like you. So are you getting lots of diverse opinions? No.
They're like me. They always make fun of me.
So, convenience sample is using any members
Take that.
of the population readily available.
That's just worded weird now.
Yeah, you should have just stuck with your
Oh.
first word.
Well, whatever. Readily available. Oh, ready, willing, and able. That's not a good choice. Okay, and then the last thing we have, when you give a survey, besides getting a biased sample, which this could actually end up, a lot of times the kids come in with their surveys and their questions are biased. You can actually start with a biased question.
Are we gonna actually have like real surveys to do, like as a project?
That's my plan.
Yeah. Yay, that'd be cool.
Is this
Do we get to do them with the person?
is this like a number 6? Or
No, because it's not a sampling technique.
like part of 5?
Nope, it's something brand new.
Is it?
It's a zit.
Yeah.
So a biased question on your survey. What's a biased question going to look like? What makes it biased, do you think?
Well, I mean, the only thing I could think of is like your facial expressions, you know? Because if you were like, oh yeah, do you like Gatorade? Powerade.
That's one way. It's a question worded in such a way that a particular outcome is favored. Or I should say a particular answer or outcome, whatever you want. Favored. And I'm going to give you an example of that Obama thing with the free community college. So I could give a survey. Do you agree with President Obama trying to get 2 years of community college free for everyone so that they can better themselves?
No.
Okay. Or I could say it, do you agree with President Obama's idea to give free community college that's going to cost the taxpayers lots and lots of dollars? See how I put 2 different spins on that same question? One, I made it look like, oh, everybody's going to get educated and be better off. Oh, it's going to cost taxpayers lots and lots of money. So I worded that two ways, one to favor it and one to be against it. So how should I ask that question so that it's not biased?
Just do you agree with
Do you agree with it? Not give my little extra little spin on the end of it. So if the question actually pushes you one way or the other, that's a biased question. Not supposed to have biased questions when you're doing a survey. Supposed to leave it open-ended so people can think about it. Okay, that's all I have. So it's just picking out the 4 different ways to gather data and then the 5 sampling techniques. What do I have for you? Wednesday in stats, page 20, 1 through 24. We're skipping, I think it's 21 and 22.